Hi everybody, this is Kat Sheffler with Cox Talks, and today I'm going to be interviewing our aligner for this event that I am currently at here. And this is Sheila Tolle, a USRowing official for 43 years.
Oh God, yeah. For quite a while. Let's just go with that.
A lot of experience, and last year the chief at the San Diego Crew Classic. So I just thought I would pick her brain while we have this opportunity. So Sheila, today we have a floating start. What advice would you give coxswains for a floating start?
You have the standard advice, which is, show up early, make sure that you know what lanes you're in, make sure you hear the rest of your competitors. So that kind of goes for any of them. I think a couple of big things is understand that when the aligner in a floating start is giving you information, giving you direction, it needs to happen immediately. So don't translate, just tell your stern pair, do what she says or he says. Part of the responsibility is let's get it aligned so we can get going. And so kind of look across. Don't, especially as you're coming up to the line, don't be that laggard or that person that's way in advance, way ahead. Kind of work together with your fellow coxswains. They're not competitors until the red flag goes down and it says go. Your colleagues as you're coming up. So I think that's key. The other thing, if you want to get to some nuances, is you want to stay, we have a tendency to want to be the boat in front because we may get an edge. With a lot of these races, especially at the collegiate level, is we'll actually have people back. So we'll say, lane 4, I need you to back a stroke. You don't want to be having backwards momentum at the start. You want to have a little bit of forward momentum. So be that person that is being told, take one stroke or touch it. You want to be that last boat that's being asked to move up. So it's a little bit of finessing.
Put yourself a little bit behind so that you have the opportunity to move forward rather than moving back.
Here, what we've seen, what Kat and I have seen this afternoon, is we have a crosswind. So just like when you have a fixed start with stake boat people, you want to be into the wind, and what'll happen with a floating start is your whole boat will float. Okay, so a little bit into the wind, just like you would, and the goal is you're working with your fellow coxswains until the flag goes down, and then they're now your competition.
Then they're the enemy. What's something you wish more coaches would teach their coxswains?
From my standpoint, it's boat handling. I would really just love for, especially as you come into racing season, that a coach would spend half an hour on a couple of practices to let their coxswains know how a boat moves. Like, okay, have your stern pair take a stroke, let it run. How far does that get you? How the boat moves. That would be great because we spend a lot of time teaching coxswains in the first few races, and you're like, okay, coach, what have you been doing? So it's boat handling, how to move a boat sideways, forward, one stroke, what's that get you, that sort of thing. I think that'd be the key thing.
Can you break down all the different officials? We have so many different roles out here today. We're aligning at the start line, but what are some of the other roles that we're going to see from different officials?
Okay, the starter, and they will give the starting commands. A bigger regatta, you'll have an aligner who aligns the boats, and you'll have a judge at the start that will say, yes, we have an alignment, and will also judge if somebody has jumped the start.
Okay.
So normally you have 2 people over here. Smaller regattas, you just don't need that many refs. You have following referees, the umpires, and their whole thing is to make sure that the racing is safe and fair.
Okay.
And then you have finish, and they basically are getting the order of finish. So those are the roles on the water. Bigger regattas, you'll have control commission, and they're making sure that people are launching, they're weighing coxswains potentially, they're weighing boats potentially.
Gotcha.
So those are all the roles. And the chief referee, which is the person that makes sure we all do what we're supposed to do.
That's a lot of people involved.
The one thing I would say, refereeing is fun. You can row and referee. And so I would say anybody that has any interest at all is, raise your hand. If you go onto the USRowing website under safety, click on that. There's a drop-down menu and it will talk refereeing, and there's how to become a referee.
Love that.
So we'd love to have more folks, especially people who have rowed, competed, and especially coxswains.
Yeah, we were both coxswains.
The best referees.
Speaking of raising hands, we've seen a lot of the coxswains do that here at the start line. Is raise their hands. I know a lot of coaches teach their coxswains to do that in practice. If they're down or if they're getting their point. But I know that officials don't acknowledge hands anymore. So, if a coxswain doesn't have their point or is making an adjustment and they have their hand up, you're going to start them anyway as long as it seems safe. What should a coxswain do if they don't feel like they have a point, or if they're in the middle of something?
Yeah, if you don't have your point, if you feel that you're not ready to start, meaning you're not pointed the right way, it's going to be 2 strokes in a collision, don't start. Nothing gets a referee's attention more than a boat that doesn't start. And we will stop the race. Bring it back, and we'll look at you like, what seems to be your issue? And you'll say, hey, I wasn't pointed correctly. Now, the worst thing that's going to happen to you is you will get assessed a warning. Okay? This is why you should never violate the traffic pattern on your way up, and you shouldn't be late to the start, because you're allowed 1 warning, and so you want it for weird stuff like that. But don't start. Very difficult to do, but when you do it, we'll stop everything, come back, figure out what's going on.
I've had some very weird starts where I've been at Crew Classic when it is really windy, and I'm pointed completely the wrong way and just kind of went for it anyway. But at what point do you think you should make that call of when you don't have a point?
I think it's when you don't feel comfortable. And keep in mind that if what you're doing at the start is the coxswain, when they say go, that the first thing you're doing is cranking on that tiller line, you've just screwed the set in your bow right at the point where they need to set the most. So, think about that. Yeah. Now, if it's that you're just like slightly off, that's not the time to do it, because especially if you have a starter behind you and they can see what your point is, if they think you're messing with them, they will actually exclude you from the race for unsportsmanlike conduct.
Ooh.
So it is a little dicey, but most of the time, early in the season, collegiate and juniors, we'll just bring them back and start them again.
If you clack oars within the breakage zone, what should a coxswain do? Should you wait to be told to weigh enough? Should you just keep going?
That's a great question. If you're in the breakage zone, raise your hand, make a big fuss.
Okay.
Make a big fuss, because you want everybody stopped.
Okay.
And then they'll come over and ask you, and you'll say we clashed oars. If it's close,
wave around before you stop and wait for them to tell you. All right, so keep going.
Like you do this thing. Like make it like somebody's dying.
Okay, but keep going until an official tells you to stop.
Now, here's the thing. If you clear the breakage zone, you've said that the start was fine.
Okay.
But you can always raise an objection at the end on clashing of oars. Okay? So you can always do that.
If it was someone else's fault.
Yeah. Well, if it was your fault too, but so it's like when in doubt, don't clash oars, but you never know, what's happening there.
Gotcha.
Okay.
All right. Any last tips, pro tips?
No, I would say, enjoy your competitive years, because they seem to go very fast, and you are responsible for your boat as soon as you launch. So act like that. You're not just riding along. You are a key component.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
You.
I appreciate it.
Thanks for asking. I appreciate it.